The security guards grabbed Marcus Whitfield by both arms and dragged him toward the elevator. "Get your hands off me!" he shouted. "I built this company. Every floor, every contract, every dollar. Mine!" But Victor Gaines just smiled from the boardroom doorway, adjusting his cufflinks like a man who'd already won. "Not anymore, Marcus. The board has spoken. 12 votes to 1. His own company, gone in 60 seconds. What Marcus didn't know was that in 3 days, a 20-year-old community college student would walk into his empty penthouse and ask 5 words that would change everything. "Can I take a look?" Before we continue, drop a comment telling me which city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Marcus Whitfield had spent 42 years climbing to the top of the world, and it took exactly 11 minutes to lose everything. He stood in the elevator, watching the numbers descend. 63, 62, 61. Each floor a memory. The late nights, the impossible deals. The moment he'd signed the lease on the first office, back when he was 26 years old, with nothing but ambition and a willingness to outwork every person in the room. The security guards flanked him like he was a criminal. "I know the way out," Marcus said, his voice cold. "I designed this building." "Sorry, Mr. Whitfield. Orders." Orders. From Victor Gaines. The man Marcus had mentored for 15 years. The man who'd stood in Marcus's living room, holding Marcus's newborn son, promising to always have his back. The elevator opened to the lobby. Cameras. Dozens of them. Reporters pressed against the glass doors like vultures waiting for a corpse to stop breathing. "Mr. Whitfield, how does it feel to lose your company? Is it true you ignored security warnings? Will you face criminal charges?" Marcus pushed through them without a word. His town car waited at the curb. The driver, a man named Eugene, who'd worked for him for 11 years, opened the door without asking questions. The car pulled away from Montgomery Innovations. Marcus watched the building shrink in the rear-view mirror. 63 floors of glass and steel that no longer belonged to him. His phone buzzed. Text after text. Board members who'd voted against him, now sending condolences. Investors pulling out. His lawyer warning him about the lawsuits already being filed. Marcus turned off the phone. 3 days earlier, everything had been different. Marcus had stood in his corner office at 9 p.m., reviewing the final projections for the Westbrook merger. His AI algorithm, 5 years of development, $200 million in research costs, was about to revolutionize predictive investment modeling. Every major financial institution in the world wanted a piece of it. Tomorrow's launch would cement his legacy. Marcus Whitfield, the janitor's son who'd built $1 billion empire from nothing. His office door opened without a knock. David Chen, his IT director, stood in the doorway. The man's face was pale, his forehead slick with sweat despite the perfect climate control. "Mr. Whitfield, we have a problem." Marcus didn't look up from his papers. "I'm busy, David. The presentation is tomorrow." "Sir, this can't wait. Our security team detected unusual activity in the core systems. There might be a breach." Now Marcus looked up. "Might be?" "We're not certain yet. The patterns are concerning. I think we should run a full diagnostic before the launch." Before the launch. Marcus set down his pen. "Do you have any idea what's riding on tomorrow? The Westbrook merger alone is worth $800 million. We have investors flying in from 3 continents. "I understand, sir, but if someone has accessed, then they'll find the most sophisticated encryption in the industry." Marcus picked up his pen again, dismissing the concern. "I didn't build this company by jumping at shadows, David. The system is fine. Focus on making sure the presentation runs smoothly." David's jaw tightened. He looked like he wanted to argue. Instead, he nodded once. "Yes, sir." The door closed behind him. Marcus returned to his projections, already forgetting the conversation. Security concerns were David's job. Tomorrow was about legacy. He had no idea that tomorrow would never come. At 11:47 p.m., Marcus was still at his desk when his computer screen flickered. He frowned, tapping the keyboard. The screen went black for a full second, then exploded with red alerts. Error messages cascaded across the display, scrolling faster than he could read. His phone buzzed violently. "What's happening?" Marcus answered. David's voice was strained, barely controlled. "Sir, the servers are crashing. All of them." "What do you mean, all of them?" "Every system connected to the AI algorithm is going down. We're trying to isolate the problem, but it's spreading. Sir, I think this is the breach I warned you about." Marcus was already moving, grabbing his jacket. "I'm coming down. Don't let anyone leave that building." The elevator ride to the server floor felt like an eternity. When the doors opened, Marcus stepped into chaos. Engineers huddled around monitors, their faces ghost white in the emergency lighting. Smoke drifted from one of the server racks. Acrid, bitter, the smell of 5 years of work burning alive. David stood in the center of it all, barking orders that no one seemed to hear. "Talk to me," Marcus demanded. David turned, and Marcus saw something in his eyes that he'd never seen before. Fear. "Someone installed a backdoor program months ago. It's been dormant until tonight. Now it's executing commands we can't override. The algorithm is corrupting itself, and is taking everything else with it. Can we shut it down? We're trying, but whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. They're routing through our own security protocols. Every time we close one door, another opens." David pulled up a screen showing lines of code racing past. "And sir, there's more. They're not just destroying data. They're copying it." Marcus felt the ground shift beneath his feet. "Copying it where? We don't know yet. But your entire algorithm, every investor file, every proprietary system we've developed, it's all being transmitted somewhere. By the time we trace it, they'll have everything." The night stretched into dawn. Marcus watched his empire dismantle itself, piece by piece. Servers physically burned out from the overload. Critical data corrupted beyond recovery. And worst of all, competitors were already receiving anonymous packages containing Montgomery Innovations' most guarded secrets. By 6 a.m., the damage was catastrophic. By 7 a.m., the media had arrived. By 8 a.m., the board had convened an emergency meeting. Marcus walked into that boardroom expecting a war council. Instead, he found a firing squad. 12 faces around the table. Men he'd mentored. Men he'd made rich. Men who now looked at him like he was already dead. Victor Gaines sat at the far end, where Marcus usually sat. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. His expression was calm, almost serene, the look of a man who'd been waiting for this moment for a very long time. "Richard," Victor said, using the wrong name deliberately. "Thank you for joining us." "My name is Marcus. You've known me for 15 years. Victor smiled, that smile that never reached his eyes. "Of course. Forgive me. The stress of the situation." "What situation? Our company was attacked. We should be coordinating a response, not sitting around a table." "That's exactly what we're doing." Victor folded his hands. "We're responding to the crisis. And unfortunately, that response requires difficult decisions." Marcus looked around the room. Not a single ally. Not a single friendly face. "What are you talking about?" Victor stood, buttoning his jacket. "The fact is, this breach happened on your watch. You were warned about security vulnerabilities. You dismissed those warnings. And now investors are pulling out. Our stock has dropped 40% since midnight. We need decisive action." Decisive action. Marcus's voice was dangerously quiet. Or a scapegoat. "Don't make this personal. You're removing me from my own company. How is that not personal? We're not removing you, Marcus. We're offering you a generous severance package. You can walk away with your dignity intact. Marcus laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. Walk away? I built this company from nothing. I was signing contracts when you were still in business school. And the company thanks you for your service. But leadership requires accountability. The breach happened. Someone has to take responsibility. The breach was sabotage. Someone inside this company planted that malware. Instead of investigating, you're throwing me out? Victor's smile widened. An interesting theory, but I'm afraid the board doesn't share your creative interpretation of events. He gestured to the others. Shall we vote? One by one, hands went up around the table. Marcus watched each one like a knife sliding between his ribs. Harold Mitchell. Marcus had given him his first job out of college. Sarah Thornton. Marcus had promoted her when everyone else said a woman couldn't handle the position. James Crawford. Marcus had paid for his daughter's cancer treatment out of his own pocket. All of them raised their hands. 12-1. Victor spread his palms. The board has spoken. Security will escort you to collect your personal effects. Marcus stood slowly. His hands were shaking, but not from fear, from rage. You planned this, he said quietly. The breach, the crash, all of it. This was you. Victor's expression didn't change. That's quite an accusation, Marcus. I'd be careful about making statements you can't prove. He nodded toward the door. Gentlemen, please escort Mr. Whitfield from the building. The security guards moved forward. Marcus looked at Victor for a long moment, memorizing every detail of his face. The satisfaction in his eyes, the slight curl of his lip. This isn't over, Marcus said. Actually, it is. Victor sat back down in Marcus's chair. Goodbye, Marcus. Do take care of yourself. The penthouse felt like a tomb. Marcus walked through rooms that had once hosted senators and celebrities. Now they echoed with nothing but silence and failure. His wife had left 6 months ago. I can't compete with your company anymore, she'd said. You're married to that building, not to me. His son was even further gone. An estrangement that had started with missed birthdays and broken promises and ended with a door slammed shut 3 years ago. Now there was no one. Nothing. Just empty rooms and a foreclosure notice that would arrive within the week. Marcus poured himself a scotch, then another, then a third. He sat in darkness, watching the city lights blur together through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The same view he'd admired 1,000 times, feeling like a king surveying his kingdom. Now he felt like a ghost, watching a world that had already moved on without him. He heard the vacuum before he saw her. Dolores Carter had been cleaning his penthouse for 3 years. She was a quiet woman in her late 40s, with kind eyes and steady hands. She arrived the same time every week, did her work efficiently, and left without expecting more than a polite nod. Marcus had barely registered her existence. She was part of the background, like the furniture or the artwork. Someone whose checks he signed without ever learning her name. Now she appeared in the doorway of his study, holding a cup of tea on a small tray. Mr. Whitfield, I thought you might need this. Marcus looked at the tea, then at her. For the first time in 3 years, he actually saw her. The gentle concern in her face, the careful way she set the cup down, the dignity in her simple uniform. Thank you, Dolores. She nodded, turning to leave, then hesitated. Sir, if you don't mind me saying, I'm sorry about what happened. It's not right, what they did to you. Something in Marcus's chest cracked, just slightly. I appreciate that. My daughter, she's good with computers. Studies all that technical stuff at community college. Dolores smiled softly. She's always talking about systems and codes and things I don't understand. If you ever need help with that sort of thing. Marcus almost laughed. Help from a community college student? From a cleaning woman's daughter? But something stopped him. Maybe it was the kindness in Dolores's eyes. Maybe it was the realization that she was the only person in 3 days who'd offered him anything besides contempt. That's kind of you to offer, he said. Dolores left him alone with his tea and his thoughts. Marcus didn't sleep that night. Instead, he sat in his home office, staring at financial statements that told a story of complete ruin. The lawsuits from investors would drain whatever assets remained. His accounts were frozen pending investigation. His reputation was destroyed. Everything he'd spent 42 years building, gone. The next evening, Marcus was still sitting in darkness when he heard a knock at his door. He ignored it. He'd been ignoring everything: calls, emails, even the basic requirements of eating and sleeping. What was the point? The knock came again, louder this time. "Mr. Whitfield?" A young woman's voice. "My mom sent me. She's worried about you." Marcus didn't move. "I know you're in there. The doorman told me." Silence. "Look, I'm not leaving until you at least let me make sure you're alive. My mom will kill me if something happens to you on her watch." Despite everything, Marcus almost smiled. The girl had nerve. He stood slowly, his joints protesting from hours of sitting in the same position. When he opened the door, he found a young woman standing in the hallway. She was maybe 20, with intelligent eyes and natural hair pulled back in a neat bun. She wore jeans and a simple sweater, and carried a laptop bag over her shoulder. Her expression was neither pitying nor judgmental, just direct. "I'm Keisha," she said. "Dolores Carter's daughter." "I know who you are. Can I come in?" Marcus stepped aside. Keisha walked into the penthouse, taking in the empty bottles and scattered papers with a quick glance. She didn't comment on the mess, didn't offer false comfort or empty words. Instead, she looked at his laptop, sitting dark and silent on the coffee table. "Is that the system that crashed?" "What's left of it. Mind if I take a look?" Marcus stared at her. This girl, this child who probably learned coding from YouTube videos, thought she could solve problems that his entire IT department couldn't. The old Marcus would have laughed her out of the room. But the old Marcus had ignored every warning and lost everything he'd ever built. "Knock yourself out," he said. Keisha sat down, opened her laptop, and connected it to his system. Her fingers moved across the keyboard with practiced confidence. Marcus watched, expecting her to give up after a few minutes. She didn't. An hour passed. Then 2. Keisha barely moved, her eyes locked on lines of code scrolling across her screen. Occasionally, she'd mutter something under her breath, technical terms Marcus didn't recognize. At 2 a.m., she finally looked up. "Mr. Whitfield." "What?" "This wasn't a hack." Marcus frowned. "What do you mean?" "A hack comes from outside. This came from inside." Keisha turned her laptop toward him. "Someone with high-level access planted malware in your system months ago. It was dormant until that night. Then, someone activated it remotely." "That's impossible. Our security—" "Your security was designed to keep outsiders out. It wasn't designed to stop someone who already had the keys." Keisha pointed at a string of code on her screen. "See the signature here? Every programmer has patterns, little habits in how they write code. It's like handwriting, unique to each person." What are you saying? I'm saying whoever did this left their fingerprints all over it. And if I can find enough samples, I can figure out exactly who wrote this code. Marcus's heart began to pound. Can you do that? Keisha met his eyes. I can try, but I need access to your company's backup servers, the ones they don't think anyone knows about. There are no backup servers. Everything was centralized. That you knew about. Keisha almost smiled. But every IT director worth anything keeps secret backups somewhere off-site. Insurance against exactly this kind of disaster. She paused. Your guy, David Chen, is he still at the company? He resigned, 2 days after they removed me. Interesting. Someone who just helped take down the CEO usually sticks around to enjoy the victory, unless he didn't want to be part of what came next. Marcus stared at this young woman, seeing her for the first time. Not as a cleaning lady's daughter, not as a community college student, but as someone with a mind sharp enough to cut through problems his expensive experts had missed. How do we find him? Keisha was already typing. Leave that to me. They found David Chen at a coffee shop in Brooklyn, looking like he hadn't slept in days. He was sitting alone in a corner booth, hunched over a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. When Marcus approached, David's head snapped up, and Marcus saw something in his eyes that looked almost like relief. Mr. Whitfield, I've been expecting you. You have? I figured you'd come eventually, once you started asking the right questions. David glanced at Keisha, then back at Marcus. Who's this? Someone who's smarter than both of us combined. Marcus slid into the booth across from David. She found the signature in the malware. She knows it came from inside. David's face went pale. I tried to warn you. That night before everything crashed, I tried to tell you something was wrong. I remember. I didn't listen. No, you didn't. David's voice was bitter. You never listened. None of you did. I sent 3 memos about security vulnerabilities. 3. They all got buried. By who? David laughed, a hollow sound. Who do you think? Victor Gaines has been planning this for almost a year. He brought in his own people, gave them access to systems they shouldn't have touched. When I tried to raise concerns, he told me to mind my own business. He paused. Then he reminded me that my wife was pregnant, that we had a mortgage, that accidents happen to people who ask too many questions. Marcus felt cold rage spreading through his chest. He threatened you. He threatened everyone. The engineers who built the algorithm, the security team who spotted the vulnerabilities, anyone who might have seen what he was doing. David pulled out a small notebook. But I kept records. Everything I saw, everything I suspected. Dates, times, access logs. I knew someday someone would come asking, why didn't you go to the police? With what? Suspicions? Notes in a notebook? David shook his head. Victor has lawyers, connections, friends in places that matter. I'm just an IT guy with a pregnant wife and a mortgage. Who would believe me? Keisha leaned forward. Mr. Chen, do you have backup servers? Off-site, somewhere Victor doesn't know about? David looked at her, surprised. How did you... Lucky guess. Do you have them? A long pause. Then David pulled a piece of paper from his pocket and wrote an address. Storage facility in Newark, Unit 247. The servers are encrypted, but this code will get you in. He slid the paper across the table. Everything that touched your system in the last 2 years is on those drives. If Victor left any trace of what he did, it'll be there. Marcus took the paper, feeling hope stir in his chest for the first time in days. Why are you helping me now? David met his eyes. Because I should have fought harder. When I saw what was happening, I should have screamed until someone listened. Instead, I protected myself and let them destroy you. He paused. I can't undo that. but maybe I can help make it right." Marcus stood, pocketing the address. "Thank you, David." "Don't thank me yet. Victor knows you're looking for evidence. He'll do whatever it takes to stop you." David's voice dropped. "Be careful, Mr. Whitfield. He's not just ambitious. He's dangerous." That night, Marcus, Keisha, and Dolores stood in an alley behind Montgomery Innovations. The building loomed above them, 63 floors of glass and steel reflecting the streetlights. Security cameras swept the main entrances. Guards patrolled the lobby. But the service entrance, the door used by cleaning crews and maintenance workers, sat in darkness. Dolores held her keyring with trembling hands. "If we get caught, we won't," Keisha whispered. "Mom, you know this building better than anyone. You've been walking these halls for 3 years. Can you get us to the server room without being seen?" Dolores looked at her daughter, then at Marcus. Something shifted in her expression. Fear gave way to determination. "Stay close. Don't make a sound." She unlocked the door. They moved through the building like ghosts. Dolores led them through service corridors Marcus had never seen. Narrow passages meant for people who weren't important enough for the main halls. They climbed stairs reserved for staff who didn't deserve the elevators. Marcus followed in humbled silence. This was his building. His name was still on the lobby directory, but he was seeing it through new eyes, through the eyes of the invisible people who kept it running, while executives took all the credit. The server room was cold and loud, filled with a hum of machines that had survived the crash. Keisha immediately connected her laptop to a terminal in the corner. Her fingers danced across the keyboard, moving faster than Marcus could follow. "I'm in," she murmured. "Their security is good, but they're not expecting an attack from inside the building. They're looking for external threats." "How long do you need?" Marcus asked. 10 minutes, maybe 15. Footsteps echoed somewhere above them. Marcus moved to the door, listening. The footsteps grew louder. A radio crackled. "Security to server room, showing unauthorized access on Terminal 7. "Keisha," Marcus hissed, "we need to move." 5 more minutes. The footsteps were right outside now. A door handle turned. "Done." Keisha yanked her laptop free, shoving it into her bag. "I got everything." Dolores grabbed her daughter's arm and pulled her toward a back exit Marcus hadn't even noticed. They ran, through corridors, downstairs, past storage rooms filled with cleaning supplies and forgotten equipment. Behind them, shouts echoed and radios squawked. They burst into the alley just as security flooded the server room. Marcus's heart hammered as they walked quickly, not running. Running would draw attention. Toward Dolores's old sedan parked a block away. Only when they were inside the car, pulling away from the building, did anyone breathe. In the back seat, Keisha clutched her laptop like a lifeline. A grin spread across her face. "That was insane!" Dolores gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles white. "Don't you ever make me do something like that again." But even as she scolded, there was a hint of pride in her voice. They'd done it. Marcus looked at Keisha through the rearview mirror. This remarkable young woman who'd seen past his failures to help him anyway. "When you said you could take a look," he said quietly, "I didn't believe you could actually help." Keisha met his eyes in the mirror. "People usually underestimate me, Mr. Whitfield. I'm used to it." The words carried weight, and for the first time in his life, Marcus felt ashamed of the man he'd been. "I won't make that mistake again," he said. The drive back to Dolores's apartment took 40 minutes, but it felt like hours. Nobody spoke. Keisha sat in the back seat with her laptop pressed against her chest, her mind already racing through the data she'd downloaded. Marcus stared out the window, watching the city blur past, still trying to process what had just happened. A week ago, he'd commanded an empire. Tonight, he'd broken into his own building like a thief, led through service corridors by his cleaning lady, while her daughter hacked into servers he'd paid millions to build. The irony wasn't lost on him. Dolores pulled into the parking lot of a modest apartment complex in Queens. Nothing fancy, just a 3-story brick building with a small courtyard and a rusted playground, where children probably played on weekends. "Home," Dolores said quietly.
It's not much, but it's safe.
Marcus looked at the building. He'd never been to this neighborhood before. Never had a reason to. His world had been penthouses and private clubs, not working-class apartment complexes where people hung laundry on their balconies. "It's perfect," he said, and meant it. Inside, the apartment was small but immaculate. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen that opened into a living room, walls covered with family photos and religious artwork. It smelled like vanilla candles and something Dolores had cooked earlier. Maybe stew, maybe pot roast. It smelled like home. Keisha immediately cleared the coffee table and set up her laptop. "I need to start going through these files. There's a lot of data here. It's going to take time to sort through." "What can I do?" Marcus asked. "Stay out of my way." She glanced up at him, then softened slightly. "I mean, make yourself useful. There's coffee in the kitchen. Mom hasn't eaten since this morning."
Neither of you, probably.
It was true. Marcus couldn't remember the last time he'd had a proper meal. "I'll handle it," he said. He found himself in Dolores's kitchen, searching through cabinets for coffee filters and mugs. It was surreal. Marcus Whitfield, former billionaire, making coffee in a stranger's kitchen at 2 a.m. while a community college student tried to save his life. A week ago, he would have laughed at the absurdity. Now, he was just grateful. Dolores appeared in the kitchen doorway. "You don't have to do that, Mr. Whitfield." "Marcus," he said, "please. After what we just did together, I think we're past formalities." Dolores smiled. A real smile, the first he'd seen from her. "Marcus, then, though it's going to take some getting used to." "For both of us." She moved past him, pulling containers from the refrigerator. "I made gumbo yesterday. It's better the second day anyway. Sit down. I'll heat it up." "Dolores, you don't have to." "Sit down," she repeated, more firmly this time. "You look like you haven't eaten in days. My mama always said you can't think straight on an empty stomach, and we need you thinking straight." Marcus sat. He watched Dolores move around the kitchen with practiced efficiency, warming the gumbo, slicing bread, setting out butter and napkins. She didn't ask what he wanted or how he liked things. She just did what needed to be done. "How long have you been cleaning houses?" Marcus asked. 26 years. Started when I was 19, right after Keisha's father left." Dolores set a bowl in front of him. "It's honest work. Keeps the lights on. Kept my daughter in school." "I never knew. About you, I mean. About your life." Dolores sat down across from him. "Why would you? I was just the cleaning lady. People like you don't need to know about people like me." The words weren't accusatory, just matter of fact, and that made them hurt more.
I should have, Marcus said. I should have asked, should have paid attention.
He looked down at the gumbo, rich and dark and fragrant. "My mother cleaned houses, you know. My father was a janitor. I spent my whole life running from where I came from. Built walls between myself and anyone who reminded me of it." "And now?" Marcus met her eyes. "Now I'm sitting in your kitchen, eating your food, depending on your daughter to save me from my own arrogance. I think maybe God has a sense of humor." Dolores laughed softly. "Oh, he definitely does." From the living room, Keisha's voice cut through the moment. "Mom, Marcus, you need to see this." They found her hunched over her laptop, her face illuminated by the screen's glow. She looked tired, but wired, the way people look when they found something important. "What is it?" Marcus asked. "I've been going through the access logs from the backup servers. Every time someone logged into the system, It created a record: date, time, terminal location, user credentials. Keisha turned the laptop so they could see. "Look at this pattern." Marcus leaned closer. The screen showed a spreadsheet of login times, hundreds of entries spanning months. "What am I looking at?" Every Friday night, between 11 p.m. and 2 a.m., someone accessed the core systems from a terminal in the executive suite. The same terminal every time. "Which terminal?" Keisha looked at him. "Victor Gaines's private office." Marcus felt his pulse quicken. "That doesn't prove anything. He's a senior executive. He had access to everything." "True, but look what he was accessing." Keisha pulled up another file. "These are the file modification logs. Every Friday night, during those access windows, someone was making changes to the AI algorithm's core code. Small changes. A line here, a function there. Nothing that would trigger alarms.
But over 6 months, those changes added up to a complete backdoor into the system. The malware. Exactly. He was building it piece by piece, hiding his work inside legitimate code updates. By the time the attack happened, the malware was so deeply embedded that it looked like part of the original program. Dolores frowned. "But how do you know it was him? Couldn't someone else have used his terminal?" "That's what I thought at first, but look at this." Keisha opened another window, showing lines of code side by side. Every programmer has a signature, habits in how they write code. Victor has very specific patterns. The way he names variables, the comments he leaves, even the spacing he uses. It's as unique as a fingerprint. She highlighted sections of code. These are samples from Victor's known work, projects he officially contributed to, code he signed off on. And these are samples from the malware. She toggled between the two. Identical patterns, same naming conventions, same commenting style, same unusual approach to error handling. Marcus stared at the screen. The patterns were unmistakable, even to his untrained eye. "He did this," Marcus breathed. "He actually did this." "It gets worse." Keisha pulled up a folder of emails. "I found communications between Victor and 3 other board members. They were planning this for almost a year. The crash was just the trigger. They'd been positioning themselves to take control long before that night." Marcus read the emails, his hands shaking with rage. Harold Mitchell, Sarah Thornton, James Crawford. The same people he'd trusted, mentored, helped build their careers. They'd been conspiring against him the whole time. One email stood out. Victor to Harold Mitchell, dated 3 months before the crash. "The old man is too arrogant to see it coming. By the time he realizes what's happening, it'll be too late. We'll have the algorithm, the investors, and the company. He'll have nothing." The old man. 42 years of work, dismissed with 2 words. "There's more," Keisha said quietly. "He didn't just destroy your company. He sold it." "What?" She opened another folder. Encrypted communications between Victor and executives at 3 competing firms. He was selling pieces of your algorithm before the crash even happened. By the time the malware activated, your competitors already had half your proprietary technology. Marcus stood up so fast he nearly knocked over the laptop. His whole body was shaking, with rage, with betrayal, with the overwhelming weight of understanding exactly how thoroughly he'd been destroyed. "He took everything from me, my company, my reputation, my life's work." Marcus's voice cracked. "And I helped him do it. I promoted him, trusted him, defended him when other people raised concerns." "You didn't know," Dolores said gently. "I should have. The signs were there. David Chen tried to warn me. Other people tried to warn me. I was too arrogant to listen. Marcus turned to face them. I spent 40 years believing I was the smartest person in every room. That's how Victor beat me. He knew I'd never suspect him, because I was too busy admiring my own reflection. The room fell silent. Keisha watched Marcus with an expression he couldn't quite read. Not pity exactly, something more complicated. "So what do we do now?" she asked. Marcus took a deep breath, forcing himself to think clearly. "We take this to the authorities, the FBI, the SEC, whoever will listen. This is corporate sabotage, theft of intellectual property, securities fraud. Victor should spend the rest of his life in prison." "It's not that simple," Keisha said. "Victor has lawyers, connections, friends in high places. We show up with evidence from backup servers we accessed without authorization, using a key that technically belongs to a cleaning lady, and they'll question every piece of data we have." "So we're stuck? We have proof, but we can't use it?" "I didn't say that." Keisha closed her laptop, thinking. "We need a lawyer, someone who knows how to present this evidence in a way that holds up in court, someone Victor can't intimidate or buy." Marcus thought of the lawyers he knew, expensive firms that charged thousands per hour, attorneys who'd happily switch sides for the right price. "I know a lot of lawyers," he said. "I don't trust any of them." "Then we need to find someone you can trust." Dolores, who had been quiet, spoke up. "What about Jennifer Walsh?" Marcus frowned. "Who?" "Jennifer Walsh. She used to be with that big law firm downtown, the one that handled your contracts. But she left a few years ago, started doing civil rights work. Said she wanted to help people who actually needed helping." "How do you know her?" Dolores smiled slightly. "I cleaned her office for 3 years. She was one of the few lawyers who ever learned my name. Good woman. Honest, not afraid of powerful people." Marcus looked at Keisha. She shrugged. "Worth a shot," she said. Jennifer Walsh's office was nothing like the corporate law firms Marcus was used to. No marble lobby, no expensive artwork, no army of assistants in designer suits. Just a converted brownstone in Brooklyn, with mismatched furniture and overflowing file cabinets. Jennifer herself was a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s, with gray-streaked hair and a no-nonsense demeanor. She listened to their story without interruption, studying the evidence Keisha had compiled, asking occasional questions. When they finished, she sat back in her chair and looked at Marcus with an expression he couldn't read. "You're telling me Victor Gaines orchestrated this entire thing? Planted malware, stole your algorithm, sold it to competitors, and had you removed from your own company?" "That's exactly what I'm telling you." "And your only witnesses are your former cleaning lady and her community college daughter?" Marcus bristled. Keisha found evidence that my entire IT department missed. She traced the malware signature, uncovered the conspiracy, and documented everything. She's not just some kid. She's brilliant. Jennifer's expression softened slightly. She turned to Keisha. "Where'd you learn to do all this?" "Library books, mostly. Online courses, YouTube tutorials." Keisha met her gaze steadily. "I didn't have money for fancy schools, but I had time and internet access. That was enough." "Self-taught?" Jennifer nodded slowly. "Some of the best programmers I know are self-taught." She turned back to Marcus. "The evidence you've shown me is compelling. If it holds up under scrutiny, Victor Gaines is looking at serious federal charges. Corporate sabotage, securities fraud, theft of trade secrets. We're talking decades in prison." "Then let's do it. Let's file charges." "It's not that simple." Jennifer leaned forward. "Victor has resources, lawyers, connections. The moment we go public with this, he's going to fight back with everything he has. He'll claim you accessed these servers illegally. He'll attack Keisha's credibility, her lack of credentials, her connection to you through her mother. He'll try to make this look like a vendetta from a bitter ex-CEO. So what? The evidence speaks for itself. Evidence doesn't speak for itself. Evidence has to be presented, explained, defended. And juries don't always understand technical details. They understand stories. Jennifer looked at all three of them. If we do this, you need to be prepared for war. Victor will try to destroy you, not just your reputation, but your lives. He'll dig up every mistake you've ever made, every questionable decision, every moment of weakness. He'll go after the people you care about. Her gaze settled on Keisha. He'll go after you especially. You're the one who found the evidence. You're the biggest threat to his freedom. He'll try to discredit you, intimidate you, make you wish you'd never heard the name Marcus Whitfield. Keisha didn't flinch. Let him try. I'm serious, young lady. This isn't a game. Victor Gaines has made people disappear before. Not physically, but professionally. Careers destroyed, families broken, lives ruined. Jennifer's voice was hard. Are you ready for that? I've been underestimated my whole life, Ms. Walsh. People see a black girl from Queens with no fancy degree and they assume I'm nobody. But I'm not nobody. I'm the person who found proof that one of the most powerful men in finance is a criminal. Keisha's voice was steady. I'm not going to hide from that. I'm going to own it. Jennifer studied her for a long moment. Then she smiled. The first smile Marcus had seen from her. Good, she said, because you're going to need that fire. They spent the next 3 days preparing. Jennifer brought in experts to verify the evidence. Forensic analysts who could confirm the data hadn't been tampered with. Programmers who could authenticate the code signatures. Former prosecutors who could advise on strategy. The case was solid. Better than solid. Victor had been so confident he'd never be caught that he'd left a trail a mile wide. But Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Victor was too smart, too careful, to leave himself so exposed. There had to be something they were missing. On the fourth night, his instincts proved correct. They were working late in Jennifer's office when her phone rang. She answered, listened for a moment, and her face went pale. We'll be right there, she said, and hung up. What is it? Marcus asked. Someone broke into Keisha's apartment, ransacked the place. Her computer equipment, her backup drives, everything she kept at home. Destroyed. Marcus felt ice spread through his veins. He turned to Keisha, who had gone very still. I wasn't home, she said. I've been staying here, working on the case. They knew that, Jennifer said grimly. They weren't trying to hurt you. Not yet. This was a message. What kind of message? The kind that says they know who you are, where you live, and what you've been doing. Jennifer grabbed her coat. We need to get to the apartment, and we need to call the police. The apartment was worse than Marcus had imagined. Every drawer had been emptied, every cabinet ransacked. Keisha's computer monitors had been smashed, her hard drives crushed, her notebooks torn to shreds. But what made Marcus's blood run cold was the message spray-painted across the living room wall. Back off, or next time we won't miss. Keisha stood in the center of the destruction, her face unreadable. Dolores clutched her daughter's arm, tears streaming down her cheeks. My baby's home, Dolores whispered. They destroyed my baby's home. We can replace things, Keisha said, but her voice was hollow. Things don't matter. This is my fault, Marcus said. I brought this into your lives. I should never have... Stop! Keisha turned to face him. You didn't bring anything. Victor Gaines did this. Victor Gaines is the one destroying lives, not you. But if you hadn't what? Accepted help when it was offered? Trusted us enough to let us in? Keisha's eyes were fierce.
We made a choice, Marcus, my mother and I. We chose to help you because it was the right thing to do. We knew there might be consequences. Not this. You didn't know about this. No, but it doesn't change anything. Keisha looked around at the wreckage of her home. Victor thinks he can scare us into backing down. He thinks we're nobody, a cleaning lady and her college student daughter. People he can crush without consequences. She turned back to Marcus, and for the first time he saw real anger in her eyes. He's wrong, and we're going to prove it. The police took statements and photographs, but Marcus could tell they weren't optimistic. Break-ins happened every day. Without witnesses or clear evidence pointing to Victor, there wasn't much they could do. Jennifer had a different approach. "We're going to use this," she said as they gathered in her office later that night. "Victor thinks he's sending a message, but he just handed us ammunition." "How?" Marcus asked. "He's scared. The break-in proves it. If he wasn't worried about our case, he wouldn't be trying to intimidate witnesses. We document everything, the timing, the nature of the destruction, the threatening message. Then we add it to our complaint as evidence of ongoing criminal conduct." "Will that be enough?" "It might be. Combined with everything else we have, it paints a picture of a man willing to do anything to protect himself." Jennifer's expression was grim. "But we need to move fast. If Victor is willing to go this far, he might be willing to go further." The next morning, Jennifer filed a comprehensive lawsuit in federal court. The complaint named Victor Gaines, Harold Mitchell, Sarah Thornton, and James Crawford as defendants. It detailed the conspiracy in exhaustive detail: the planted malware, the stolen algorithm, the coordinated takeover, the sale of proprietary information to competitors. Every email, every access log, every piece of evidence Keisha had uncovered was included. Within hours, the story broke. Marcus watched the news coverage from Jennifer's office, surrounded by his unlikely team. Reporters stood outside Victor's Manhattan townhouse, outside the corporate headquarters of Montgomery Innovations, outside the homes of the other defendants. "Stunning allegations of corporate sabotage rock the financial world," one anchor intoned. Former CEO Marcus Whitfield claims he was the victim of an elaborate conspiracy orchestrated by his own business partner. Victor appeared briefly, pushing through a crowd of reporters with his lawyers flanking him. "These allegations are completely baseless," he said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Marcus Whitfield is a bitter man, trying to blame others for his own failures. I'm confident the courts will see through this pathetic attempt at revenge." But Marcus noticed something in Victor's eyes that hadn't been there before. Fear. "He's rattled," Jennifer observed. "Good. Scared people make mistakes." The response came faster than any of them expected. Within 48 hours, Victor's lawyers had filed a countersuit: defamation, malicious prosecution, conspiracy to commit fraud. They claimed Marcus had orchestrated the break-in himself to gain sympathy. They accused Keisha of hacking into company systems and planting fabricated evidence. And they demanded immediate sanctions against Jennifer's firm. "They're trying to bury us in paperwork," Jennifer said, reviewing the filings. "Make us spend so much time and money defending ourselves that we can't pursue the main case." Can they do that? They can try, but they're also exposing themselves. Every motion they file, every accusation they make, creates more opportunities for discovery, more chances for us to dig into their records and find additional evidence. So what do we do? Jennifer smiled, a cold, determined smile. We don't back down. We don't apologize. We don't negotiate. We fight. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for 6 weeks out. Both sides would present their evidence to a judge, who would decide whether the case had enough merit to proceed to trial. 6 weeks felt like an eternity. Marcus moved into a small hotel near Jennifer's office. The penthouse was gone, seized by creditors. His bank accounts were still frozen. He was living on borrowed money and borrowed time. But he wasn't alone. Keisha worked 18-hour days, strengthening their technical evidence, preparing responses to every attack Victor's lawyers could launch. She found additional witnesses, former employees who'd been threatened into silence, competitors who'd received Victor's stolen information and were willing to testify in exchange for immunity. Dolores handled the human side. She coordinated schedules, managed communications, made sure everyone ate and slept and took care of themselves. She was the heart of their operation, even if she didn't understand half of what her daughter was doing on those computers. And Marcus? Marcus learned to listen. For the first time in his life, he wasn't the smartest person in the room. He wasn't the one making all the decisions. He was part of a team, contributing what he could, deferring to others when they knew better. It was humbling. It was uncomfortable. It was exactly what he needed. One evening, a week before the hearing, Marcus found himself alone with Keisha in Jennifer's conference room. She was reviewing documents, her eyes red from hours of staring at screens. "You should take a break," Marcus said. "Can't. There's too much to do." "Keisha." He sat down across from her. "You've done more for me than anyone has in 40 years. You've put your life on hold, risked your safety, sacrificed everything. For what? To help some arrogant billionaire who couldn't even remember your mother's name?" Keisha stopped working. She looked at him for a long moment. "You want to know why I helped you?" "Yes." "Because you were broken." Keisha's voice was quiet. "That first night, when I came to your penthouse, I expected to find the man my mother had described. Cold, arrogant, distant. But that's not what I found." "What did you find?" "Someone who was lost. Someone who'd built his whole life on a foundation of ego and ambition and was watching it all crumble. Someone who needed help but didn't know how to ask for it." Marcus looked away. "I was pathetic." "You were human." Keisha leaned forward. "Marcus, I grew up watching my mother work for people who treated her like she was invisible. Rich people, powerful people, people who never bothered to learn her name or ask about her life. She never complained. That's not who she is. But I saw what it did to her, how it wore her down, made her feel small." "I did that to her," Marcus said quietly. "For 3 years, I did exactly that." "Yes, you did. And when I found out you were the one who needed help, part of me wanted to let you suffer. Let you feel what it's like to be invisible, to be dismissed, to be treated like you don't matter." "Why didn't you?" Keisha was quiet for a moment. "Because my mother asked me to help. And because I realized that hating you wouldn't change anything. It wouldn't undo the years of being overlooked. It wouldn't make my mother's sacrifice mean more." She met his eyes. "The only thing that would change things is if you actually became different. If losing everything taught you something." "Did it?" "I don't know yet." Keisha turned back to her documents. "But I'm willing to find out." Marcus sat in silence, her words echoing in his mind. He thought about all the people he'd overlooked, dismissed, treated as less than human because they didn't match his idea of success. He thought about his mother, who'd cleaned houses just like Dolores. About his father, who'd spent 40 years mopping floors in buildings where executives never learned his name. He'd spent his whole life running from where he came from, and it had turned him into exactly the kind of person he should have despised. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "I know that doesn't fix anything. But I'm sorry." Keisha nodded, not looking up from her work. "Don't be sorry. Be different." Marcus didn't respond. But he made a promise to himself, silently, in that moment. If they won this fight, if they brought Victor down and reclaimed some measure of justice, he would spend the rest of his life being different. He owed that to Keisha, to Dolores, to everyone he'd ever treated as invisible. But first, they had to survive the next 6 weeks. And Victor Gaines was just getting started. The morning of the preliminary hearing arrived with a cold rain that matched Marcus's mood. He stood in his hotel bathroom, staring at his reflection. The man looking back at him bore little resemblance to the billionaire who'd commanded boardrooms and terrified competitors. His face was thinner, lined with weeks of stress and sleepless nights. His suit was borrowed from one of Jennifer's colleagues, not the custom-tailored Armani he'd once worn, but it fit well enough. His phone buzzed.
A text from Keisha. "Ready?" He typed back, "No, but let's do it anyway." They met outside the federal courthouse at 8 a.m. Jennifer was already there, flanked by 2 junior attorneys carrying boxes of evidence. Keisha wore a simple gray suit that made her look older than her 20 years. Dolores stood beside her daughter, dressed in her Sunday best, her hands clasped tight. "Remember," Jennifer said, "this is just the preliminary hearing. We're not trying to win the case today. We're trying to convince the judge that we have enough evidence to proceed to trial." "And if we don't?" Marcus asked. "Then Victor walks free, and we start over." "But that's not going to happen." Jennifer met his eyes. "We have the evidence, Marcus. We have the truth. Now we just have to make sure the judge sees it." Inside the courthouse, reporters filled every available seat. Cameras weren't allowed in the courtroom, but Marcus could feel the weight of public attention pressing in from all sides. This case had become a national story. The fallen billionaire fighting back against the man who'd destroyed him. Victor was already seated at the defendant's table, surrounded by a small army of lawyers in identical dark suits. He looked calm, confident, almost bored, like this was just another business meeting he'd have to endure before getting back to making money. When Marcus walked in, Victor turned to look at him. Their eyes met across the courtroom. Victor smiled. That same cold smile from the boardroom, the day he'd taken everything. Marcus didn't look away, didn't flinch. He just walked to his seat and sat down. Judge Catherine Morrison entered at exactly 9 a.m. She was a sharp-eyed woman in her 60s, known for running a tight courtroom and having zero tolerance for theatrics. Marcus had researched her extensively. She'd built her reputation on fairness and an almost obsessive commitment to following the evidence. "All rise," the bailiff called. The hearing began. Marcus Blackwell, Victor's lead attorney, went first. He was everything Marcus expected: polished, expensive, ruthless. He spoke for nearly an hour, painting a picture of Marcus Whitfield as a bitter, delusional man who'd mismanaged his company into ruin and was now trying to blame everyone but himself. "Your Honor, what we have here is a simple case of scapegoating," Blackwell said, his voice smooth as aged whiskey. "Mr. Whitfield built a successful company, then watched it crumble due to his own negligence. Rather than accept responsibility, he's concocted an elaborate conspiracy theory, dragging innocent people into his personal vendetta." He gestured toward Keisha, who sat straight and still in her chair. "The plaintiff's key witness is a 20-year-old community college student with no credentials, no professional experience, and a personal connection to Mr. Whitfield through her mother's employment. Her so-called evidence was obtained through questionable means, accessing backup servers without authorization, using a key that technically belongs to a cleaning lady." Blackwell paused for effect. "This isn't a case about corporate conspiracy. It's about a fallen executive who can't accept that his own failures brought him down. We respectfully request that this court dismiss these baseless allegations and allow my client to return to his life." When Blackwell sat down, Jennifer rose. She didn't match his polish or his confidence. She was smaller, plainer, and spoke with a directness that cut through the courtroom like a knife. "Your Honor, over the next several hours, I will present evidence proving beyond any reasonable doubt that Victor Gaines engaged in a systematic, premeditated campaign to destroy Montgomery Innovations and steal its proprietary technology." She walked toward the evidence table, picking up a thick folder. "We have time-stamped access logs showing Mr. Gaines accessing restricted systems during overnight hours. We have code analysis proving that the malware planted in the company's systems bears Mr. Gaines's unique programming signature. We have email communications between Mr. Gaines and other defendants, dating back nearly a year, discussing their plan to remove Mr. Whitfield and take control of his company." Jennifer turned to face Victor directly. "We have evidence that Mr. Gaines sold proprietary technology to competitors before the crash even happened. We have testimony from former employees who were threatened into silence. And we have documentation of witness intimidation, including a break-in at my client's witness's home, with a threatening message spray-painted on her wall." She looked at Judge Morrison. "This case isn't about revenge or jealousy, Your Honor. It's about holding powerful people accountable when they abuse the trust placed in them. The evidence will speak for itself." The first witness was David Chen. He looked nervous as he took the stand, his hands fidgeting with his tie. But his voice was steady as he told his story. How he discovered the security vulnerabilities months before the crash. How he'd tried to warn Marcus. How Victor had threatened him into silence. "Mr. Gaines told me that my wife was pregnant," David said. "That we had a mortgage. That accidents happen to people who ask too many questions. I understood what he meant." On cross-examination, Blackwell tried to paint David as a disgruntled employee with an axe to grind. "Mr. Chen, isn't it true that you were passed over for promotion 3 times during your tenure at Montgomery Innovations?" "Yes." "And isn't it true that you blamed Mr. Gaines for those missed promotions?" "No, I blamed myself. I wasn't aggressive enough in advocating for my own work." David looked directly at Victor. "But I'm not going to blame myself for staying silent when I should have spoken up. That's on me. And I'm trying to make it right." The second witness was a forensic analyst named Dr. Sarah Mitchell, an expert in digital signatures and code authentication. She walked the court through the technical evidence, explaining how every programmer leaves unique patterns in their work. "It's like handwriting," she said. "You can try to disguise it, but trained analysts can still identify the author. The malware found in Montgomery Innovations systems shows consistent patterns that match Mr. Gaines's known programming style. The probability of these patterns occurring by chance is less than 1 in 10 million. Blackwell attacked her methodology, her credentials, her conclusions. But Dr. Mitchell held firm. "I've testified in over 40 federal cases," she said calmly. "My methodology has been accepted by courts across the country. The evidence is clear, Mr. Blackwell. Your client wrote this code." Then it was Keisha's turn. She walked to the witness stand with her head held high, her laptop bag over her shoulder. Marcus watched her, his heart pounding. Everything depended on the next few hours. Jennifer began with simple questions, establishing Keisha's background and expertise. "Ms. Carter, can you tell the court about your education in computer science?" "I'm currently in my 3rd year at community college, studying computer systems and cybersecurity. I've also completed several advanced online certifications in network security and forensic analysis."
What sparked your interest in this field? Keisha smiled slightly. When I was 15, my mother's bank account was hacked. We lost $300 we couldn't afford to lose. I taught myself enough about computer systems to trace the hacker and report them to the FBI. We got our money back, and I got hooked on understanding how digital systems work.
Jennifer walked her through the discovery process. How she'd found the malware signature, traced the access patterns, built the timeline of Victor's actions. Keisha explained each step clearly, using language that even non-technical observers could understand. She was patient, thorough, unshakable. Then Blackwell stood for cross-examination. "Ms. Carter," he began, his tone dripping with condescension. "You're 20 years old. Is that correct?" "Yes." "You attend community college, not a prestigious university like MIT or Stanford." "That's correct." "In fact, you couldn't afford to attend a 4-year university, could you?" Jennifer shot to her feet. "Objection! Relevance, Your Honor." "I'm establishing the witness's credentials," Blackwell said smoothly. "Overruled. But make your point quickly, Mr. Blackwell." Blackwell smiled. "Mrs. Carter, isn't it true that you have no formal degree, no professional certifications from recognized institutions, and no actual work experience in cybersecurity? I have certifications from several recognized online programs. Self-paced courses anyone can take. Not exactly the same as a degree from a real university, is it?" Keisha's expression didn't change. "Some of the best programmers in the world are self-taught. Bill Gates dropped out of college. Steve Jobs never finished his degree. Credentials don't determine skill, Mr. Blackwell. Results do." "Results," Blackwell laughed. "You're testifying about highly complex corporate systems based on training you got from internet videos and library books. Tell me, Ms. Carter, who's paying you to testify today?" "No one." "Really? Because you're now listed as a partner in Mr. Whitfield's new company, aren't you? Carter Technologies. That sounds like payment to me." "I'm a partner because I helped build the company, not because I testified. The partnership was offered after I'd already uncovered the evidence." "How convenient." Blackwell paced before the witness stand. "Let's talk about how you obtained this evidence. You accessed company servers without authorization, didn't you?" "I accessed backup servers with information provided by the former IT director. Backup servers that were company property you had no legal right to access. The company was stolen from its rightful owner through illegal means. I was helping recover evidence of that theft." "That's not for you to decide, Miss Carter. You're not a lawyer. You're not a judge. You're certainly not law enforcement." Blackwell's voice rose. "You're just a girl playing hacker, breaking into secure systems because you thought you were smarter than everyone else." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Judge Morrison banged her gavel. "Mr. Blackwell, watch your tone." But Blackwell pressed on, his face reddening with manufactured outrage. "Your mother cleans Mr. Whitfield's home, correct?" "Correct." "She must have been devastated when her employer lost everything. Did she convince you to help? Perhaps even suggest there might be financial rewards if you could somehow prove a conspiracy?" Keisha's composure finally cracked, but not with anger, with something more powerful. Absolute certainty. "My mother is the most honest person I know." Her voice was calm but fierce. "She taught me that character isn't about what you do when people are watching. It's about what you do when no one will ever know." She spent her entire life doing honest work for people who never even learned her name. She leaned forward, holding Blackwell's gaze. "So no, Mr. Blackwell, she didn't convince me to lie. She taught me to tell the truth, even when it's inconvenient. That's what I'm doing right now." The courtroom fell silent. Keisha continued, her voice steady and clear. "You're right that I'm young. You're right that I don't have fancy degrees or impressive credentials. But I know code the way some people know music or art. I can see patterns where others see noise.
And what I saw in Montgomery Innovation Systems was clear, deliberate sabotage, with Victor Gaines's fingerprints all over it. She looked directly at Victor, who had gone very still. You can question my credentials all you want. You can mock my education. You can try to make me feel small. But you can't change what the evidence shows. And the evidence shows that your client is a thief, a liar, and a criminal. Marcus felt tears prick his eyes. He looked at Dolores, who was crying openly, her hand pressed to her heart. Blackwell stood frozen for a moment, clearly thrown. Then he forced a smile. I have no further questions. Jennifer stood for redirect. Ms. Carter, can you explain to the court what a digital signature is? It's like a fingerprint left in code. Every programmer has habits, ways they structure commands, comments they leave, shortcuts they prefer. These patterns are as unique as handwriting. And you found Victor Gaines's digital signature in the malware that destroyed Montgomery Innovations? Not just found it, I found it dozens of times across multiple files, all timestamped to periods when Mr. Gaines had exclusive access to the systems. The probability of someone else mimicking his exact programming style at the exact times he was logged in approaches zero. Jennifer displayed the evidence on screens throughout the courtroom. Lines of code with highlighted sections showing identical patterns across different files. Can you explain what we're seeing? These are 3 different pieces of malware planted at different times. Notice how they all use the same variable naming conventions, the same commenting style, the same unusual approach to error handling. This isn't coincidence. This is one person's work, repeated across months. The jury leaned forward, studying the screens. Even those without technical knowledge could see the patterns, the repetition, the deliberate consistency. Thank you, Ms. Carter. No further questions. Keisha stepped down from the witness stand. As she walked past Victor's table, he stared at her with undisguised hatred. Keisha met his gaze without flinching. Then she took her seat beside Marcus. You were magnificent, he whispered. I just told the truth, she whispered back. The hearing stretched into a second day, then a third. Expert witnesses confirmed Keisha's analysis. Former employees testified about Victor's threats and intimidation. The FBI agent who'd examined the backup servers confirmed that the evidence was authentic and properly preserved. On the final day, Victor took the stand. He was smooth, polished, every inch the successful executive. He denied everything with calm confidence, offering explanations for every piece of evidence Jennifer presented. The late-night access? He was a workaholic. Everyone knew that. The emails discussing the takeover? Taken out of context. He was just exploring options to help the company. The digital signature in the malware? A coincidence. Or perhaps someone had framed him. But Jennifer was relentless. Mr. Gaines, the access logs show you were logged into the core systems every Friday night for 6 months preceding the crash. Is that correct? I often worked late. It wasn't unusual. At 2 a.m., accessing files related to the AI algorithm that you had no professional reason to access? I was curious about the project. I wanted to understand what we were building. You wanted to understand, or you wanted to sabotage? Objection, Blackwell shot to his feet. Argumentative. Sustained. Move on, Ms. Walsh. Jennifer picked up a folder. Mr. Gaines, I have here copies of emails you sent to executives at 3 competing firms, Hartwell Technologies, Pinnacle Systems, and Meridian Financial. In these emails, you discuss selling them proprietary information that would give them significant competitive advantages. Do you deny sending these emails? Victor's jaw tightened. I don't recall those specific communications. You don't recall discussing the sale of trade secrets? I have many business communications. I can't remember every email I've ever sent. Let me refresh your memory. Jennifer read from one of the emails. The algorithm is worth at least $200 million on the open market. Once Whitfield is out of the picture, we can negotiate better terms. Does that refresh your memory? Victor's face had gone pale. That email was taken out of context.
What context would make selling stolen technology acceptable, Mr. Gaines?
Objection. Withdrawn. Jennifer set down the folder. Mr. Gaines, one final question. On the night of the system crash, where were you? At home, asleep. Can anyone confirm that? My wife. Your wife who filed for divorce 3 weeks ago? The same wife who is currently cooperating with federal investigators? The courtroom erupted. Blackwell objected. Victor's face went from pale to gray. Judge Morrison banged her gavel, calling for order. Mr. Gaines, Jennifer continued calmly, are you aware that your wife has provided investigators with additional evidence, including recordings of conversations in which you discuss the conspiracy in detail? Victor's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Marcus watched his former partner crumble. The confident mask was gone, replaced by something that looked very much like fear. No further questions, Your Honor. The closing arguments were brief.
Jennifer presented a clear timeline of Victor's conspiracy. The planning, the execution, the cover-up, all backed by irrefutable evidence. Blackwell tried to cast doubt, arguing that the evidence was circumstantial, that alternative explanations existed. But his words felt hollow against the weight of proof. Judge Morrison retired to consider her ruling. The wait was agony. Marcus sat in the hallway with Jennifer, Keisha, and Dolores, none of them speaking. There was nothing left to say. They'd done everything they could. Now it was in someone else's hands. After 2 hours, the bailiff called them back into the courtroom. Judge Morrison looked at both tables, her expression unreadable. I've reviewed all the evidence presented in this hearing, she began. I've considered the testimony of all witnesses and the arguments of both counsels. She paused. The evidence presented by the plaintiff is substantial and compelling. The digital signatures, the access logs, the communications between defendants. Taken together, they paint a clear picture of a coordinated conspiracy to sabotage Montgomery Innovations and remove Mr. Whitfield from his position. Marcus felt his heart stop. Furthermore, the evidence of witness intimidation, the break-in at Ms. Carter's residence, the threatening message, suggests an ongoing pattern of criminal conduct that this court takes very seriously. Judge Morrison turned to Victor. Mr. Gaines, the evidence against you is overwhelming. I find that there is more than sufficient cause to proceed to trial on all charges. The courtroom exploded with noise. Reporters rushed for the exits. Victor's lawyers huddled together, talking urgently. Victor sat frozen, staring at nothing. Additionally, Judge Morrison continued, given the evidence of witness intimidation and the risk of flight, I am ordering Mr. Gaines to surrender his passport and submit to electronic monitoring pending trial. Bail is set at $10 million. She banged her gavel. This court is adjourned. Outside the courthouse, the rain had stopped. Sunlight broke through the clouds as Marcus, Keisha, and Dolores emerged into a sea of reporters and cameras. Jennifer stepped forward to make a brief statement. Justice was served today. We look forward to presenting our full case at trial and holding all the defendants accountable for their crimes. As they walked toward the waiting car, Marcus felt a hand on his arm. He turned to find Keisha looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. We're not done yet, she said quietly. The trial is going to be worse. Victor's going to fight with everything he has. I know. Are you ready for that? Marcus looked back at the courthouse, then at Dolores, then at Jennifer. At the team of unlikely allies who'd believed in him when no one else would. Yes, he said, I'm ready. And for the first time since losing everything, he actually believed it. The weeks between the preliminary hearing and the trial were supposed to be for preparation. Instead, they became a war of attrition. Victor's legal team filed motion after motion, requests to suppress evidence, demands for sanctions against Jennifer's firm, challenges to every witness they planned to call. Each motion required a response. Each response consumed time and money they didn't have. But the worst attacks came outside the courtroom. 3 days after the hearing, a story appeared in a major financial publication. The Real Marcus Whitfield, a history of questionable business practices. The article dredged up every controversy from Marcus's past, lawsuits from former employees, partnerships that had gone sour, decisions that looked ruthless in hindsight. None of it was illegal, but all of it was damaging.
"They're trying to poison the jury pool," Jennifer said, tossing the magazine onto her desk. "Make sure everyone in the country has already decided you're a villain before they even hear the evidence." "Can we stop them?" "Not without proving Victor's team is behind the leaks, which we can't do. The best we can do is ignore it and focus on the trial." But ignoring it was easier said than done. Marcus watched his name dragged through the mud on cable news, social media, everywhere he looked. Commentators debated whether he was a victim or a con man. Former acquaintances gave interviews sharing unflattering stories. People he'd never met posted their opinions as if they knew him personally. The hardest part was knowing that some of the criticism was fair. He had been ruthless. He had made decisions that hurt people. He had built his empire on the backs of employees he'd never bothered to know, treating them as tools rather than human beings. Victor was using the truth against him, weaponizing his own history. "How do you deal with this?" Marcus asked Keisha one evening, as they reviewed documents in Jennifer's conference room. "People saying horrible things about you, and you can't defend yourself?" Keisha looked up from her laptop. "I've been dealing with it my whole life. People see a black girl from Queens and they make assumptions. Too young, too poor, too uneducated. After a while, you learn that their opinions say more about them than about you." "That's easier to say than to believe." "You're right, it is." She closed her laptop. "But here's what I've learned. You can't control what people think of you. You can only control who you actually are. If you spend your life chasing other people's approval, you'll never be free." Marcus sat with that for a moment. "When did you get so wise?" "Probably around the time I realized that nobody was coming to save me, that if I wanted a different life, I'd have to build it myself." She paused. "Sound familiar?" It did, more than she knew. The trial began on a gray Monday morning, 6 weeks after the preliminary hearing. The courtroom was packed. Journalists, investors, curious onlookers who'd followed the story through months of headlines. Marcus took his seat at the plaintiff's table, Keisha and Jennifer beside him. Dolores sat in the front row of the gallery, her hands clasped in her lap. Victor entered, surrounded by his legal team. But something was different. The confident swagger was gone. He looked thinner, older, like a man who hadn't slept properly in weeks. His wife had filed for divorce and was cooperating with prosecutors. 3 of his co-conspirators had accepted plea deals in exchange for testimony against him. He was alone now, cornered, fighting for his freedom. Marcus almost felt sorry for him. Almost. The trial proceeded much like the preliminary hearing, but more intense, more detailed. Jennifer presented evidence methodically, building her case piece by piece. Each witness added another layer to the story of betrayal and sabotage. But Victor's defense team had a strategy too. They couldn't deny the evidence. Too much of it was irrefutable. Instead, they tried to shift blame. Victor had been manipulated by the other conspirators, Victor had been under tremendous pressure. Victor had made mistakes, yes, but he wasn't the mastermind, just a pawn who'd gotten in over his head. "My client deeply regrets his involvement in these events," Blackwell said during his opening statement. "But the evidence will show that he was following the lead of others, not directing the conspiracy himself." Marcus Whitfield was not the victim of a mastermind. He was the victim of a group of desperate men who made terrible choices under terrible circumstances. Jennifer's rebuttal was swift. "The defense would have you believe that Victor Gaines is a victim, a pawn, a follower. But the evidence tells a different story. Every communication, every plan, every decision traces back to Victor Gaines. He didn't follow the conspiracy. He created it, directed it, and profited from it. The other defendants have all testified that Victor was the leader. And now he wants you to believe he was just along for the ride?" She shook her head. "Don't insult the jury's intelligence." On the fourth day of the trial, Harold Mitchell took the stand as a prosecution witness. He'd been one of the board members who'd voted against Marcus. He'd accepted a plea deal, 5 years in federal prison instead of 20, in exchange for his testimony. "Whose idea was it to remove Mr. Whitfield from the company?" Jennifer asked. "Victor's. It was always Victor's idea." "Can you describe how the conspiracy developed?" Mitchell nodded, his face pale under the courtroom lights. "Victor came to me about a year before the crash. Said he had a way to take control of the company, but he needed help from inside the board. He showed me the plan. Plant malware in the system, make it look like Marcus had ignored security warnings, then use the chaos to force him out." "Did he explain why he wanted Mr. Whitfield removed?" "He said Marcus was holding the company back, that he was too conservative, too cautious. Victor wanted to monetize the algorithm faster, take bigger risks." Mitchell paused. "But honestly, I think it was personal too. Victor hated Marcus. Hated the way Marcus always got the credit, always got the spotlight. He wanted to prove he was smarter, better." "And you agreed to help him?" Mitchell looked down at his hands. "I was greedy. Victor promised me a bigger stake in the company once he took over. I told myself it was just business, that Marcus would land on his feet anyway." He looked up at Marcus. "I was wrong. About all of it." Marcus met his former colleague's eyes. He saw regret there, genuine and painful. He wanted to feel satisfied, vindicated. Instead, he just felt tired. The trial continued for another week. Witness after witness confirmed Victor's role as the mastermind. Technical experts verified Keisha's analysis. Financial investigators traced the money Victor had received from selling stolen technology. And through it all, Victor sat at the defendant's table, watching his life unravel. On the final day of testimony, something unexpected happened. Victor asked to take the stand again. His lawyers objected. They argued, pleaded, practically begged him to stay silent. But Victor insisted. "I have something to say," he told Judge Morrison. "I have a right to speak." The judge allowed it. Victor walked to the witness stand like a man approaching his own execution. When he sat down, he looked directly at Marcus. "I did it," he said. The courtroom went silent. "Everything they said I did it. I planted the malware. I sold the algorithm. I orchestrated the takeover." His voice was flat, drained of all emotion. "I spent 15 years working beside Marcus Whitfield, watching him take credit for everything we built together. Watching him collect the awards, the magazine covers, the speaking invitations. And I told myself, someday, I'll show everyone who the real genius is." He laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. "But I wasn't a genius. I was just a thief, a liar, a man so consumed by jealousy that he destroyed everything he touched." Blackwell stood up. "Your Honor, my client is clearly not in a proper state of mind to—" "Sit down," Victor said, not taking his eyes off Marcus.
I'm done listening to lawyers. He turned back to the courtroom. You want to know the worst part? Even after everything I did, Marcus never stopped believing in me. When I came to him with problems, he helped me solve them. When I made mistakes, he covered for me. He treated me like a partner, like a friend. And I repaid him by stabbing him in the back. Victor's voice cracked. I told myself I was ambitious, driven, willing to do what it took to succeed. The truth is, I was terrified. Terrified that I wasn't good enough, that I'd never be anything more than Marcus Whitfield's shadow. He paused. So I destroyed him, and in the process, I destroyed myself. The courtroom was absolutely still. Victor looked at Marcus one last time. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know, watching you rebuild, watching you become someone better than you were, it's taught me more about leadership than I learned in 20 years of business school. He turned to Judge Morrison. I'm guilty, Your Honor, of everything. I'm ready to accept whatever punishment this court sees fit. The silence stretched for a long moment. Then Judge Morrison cleared her throat. Does the defense have any further questions for this witness? Blackwell looked like he wanted to disappear through the floor. No, Your Honor. The witness may step down. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. When they returned, the courtroom was so quiet that Marcus could hear his own heartbeat. Has the jury reached a verdict? Judge Morrison asked. We have, Your Honor. The 4 persons stood, holding a piece of paper in trembling hands. On the charge of corporate sabotage, how do you find? Guilty. On the charge of theft of proprietary information? Guilty. On the charge of securities fraud? Guilty. On the charge of conspiracy to commit fraud? Guilty. Each word hit like a hammer blow. Marcus felt the tension drain from his body, replaced by something he hadn't felt in months. Relief. Vindication. And underneath it all, an unexpected sadness. He looked at Victor, who sat motionless at the defendant's table. The man who'd destroyed his life was now facing decades in prison. Justice had been served. But it didn't feel like victory. It felt like waste. All those years of partnership, of shared dreams, of building something together, destroyed by jealousy and fear. Judge Morrison spoke again. Mr. Gaines, this court finds you guilty on all counts. Sentencing will be scheduled for 3 weeks from today. In the meantime, you will be remanded to custody without bail. She turned to Marcus. Mr. Whitfield, the court also rules in your favor on all civil claims. Full ownership of the algorithm and associated intellectual property is restored to you, along with compensatory damages in the amount of... Marcus stood, interrupting the judge. Your Honor, if I may. Judge Morrison raised an eyebrow. Mr. Whitfield? I don't want the money. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Jennifer grabbed his arm. Marcus, what are you doing? He ignored her, keeping his eyes on the judge. I want the damages donated to scholarships for students from underprivileged backgrounds pursuing technology degrees. Students like Keisha Carter, who have the talent but not the means. Students who've been told their whole lives that they're not good enough, smart enough, or connected enough to succeed. He looked at Keisha, who was staring at him with wide eyes. That money won't give me back what I lost, but it can give someone else a chance at the life they deserve. Judge Morrison studied him for a long moment. Then she smiled, the first genuine smile Marcus had seen from her. A noble gesture, Mr. Whitfield. The court approves. She paused. Is there anything else? Yes, Your Honor. I'd like to request that Ms. Keisha Carter be officially recognized as co-creator of the algorithm recovery process. Her contributions to its preservation and recovery should be part of the legal record. Granted.
Judge Morrison looked at Keisha. Ms. Carter, congratulations on your official recognition. This court acknowledges your exceptional skill and courage. Keisha nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. Judge Morrison banged her gavel. This court is adjourned. Outside the courthouse, the sun had broken through the clouds. Reporters swarmed, cameras flashing, microphones thrust forward like weapons. But Marcus barely noticed them. He was looking at Keisha and Dolores, who stood together in the middle of the chaos, holding each other. "Mr. Whitfield," a reporter shouted, "how does it feel to win?" Marcus stepped forward, raising his hand for silence. "Justice was served today," he said. "Not just for me, but for everyone who's been told they're not good enough, smart enough, or important enough to matter. This victory belongs to a young woman who refused to be silenced, and a mother who taught her that integrity is worth more than comfort." He looked at Keisha. "It belongs to people like Keisha Carter, who had every reason to let me fail and chose to help me instead. She didn't save my company. She saved me. From my own arrogance, from my own blindness, from spending the rest of my life blaming everyone but myself for my failures." He turned back to the reporters. "I don't know what comes next, but I know this. Whatever I build from here, it's going to be different. Better. Built on the values I should have learned 40 years ago." He took a breath. "Thank you." As the car pulled away from the courthouse, Marcus sat between Keisha and Dolores, none of them speaking. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by exhaustion, and something else. Something quieter. "He didn't have to do that," Keisha said finally. "Give away the money. Put my name on the record." "Yes, I did." "Why?" Marcus thought about it. "Because for 40 years, I measured success in dollars and recognition. I built my empire on the idea that I was better than other people. Smarter, harder working, more deserving. And it was all a lie. The only thing that separated me from you was opportunity. You had to fight for everything I took for granted." He looked at her. "That scholarship money won't change the world, but it might change someone's life. And that's more than any amount of profit ever did for me." Dolores reached across and took his hand. "Marcus Whitfield, I've been cleaning up after rich people for 26 years. I thought I'd seen everything, but I never expected to see one of them actually learn something." Marcus laughed, a real laugh, the first in months. "Neither did I, Dolores. Neither did I." That night, the three of them sat together in Dolores' small apartment, eating takeout and watching the news coverage of the verdict. Every channel was running the story. Every commentator was dissecting what it meant. But in that living room, none of it mattered. What mattered was that they'd won. Not just the trial, but something more important. They'd proven that truth could beat money, that courage could beat power, that three people, a disgraced billionaire, a cleaning lady, and her community college daughter, could take on a system designed to protect the wealthy and connected, and win. "What now?" Keisha asked. Marcus set down his chopsticks. "I've been thinking about that. I want to rebuild, but not the same way I did before. I want to create something that actually matters, something built on the values you and your mother showed me." "What kind of something?" "A technology company, but different from the ones I built before. Focused on ethical innovation, diverse hiring, community investment." He paused. "And I want you to run it with me, as an equal partner." Keisha stared at him. "Marcus, I'm 20 years old. I haven't even finished my degree." "You don't need a degree. You need vision, integrity, and the ability to see things other people miss. You have all three." "He's right, baby," Dolores said softly. "You've always had that." Keisha shook her head. I don't trust the corporate world. I've seen what it does to people. Then help me build one that deserves your trust. Marcus leaned forward. No boardrooms full of sharks. No cutting corners or crushing competition. Just honest innovation with people who care about making things better. Keisha was silent for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Equal partners, she said finally. That means equal say in all decisions. Equal partners. And my mother is part of this too. On the board. Not as a token, but as a real voice. Marcus looked at Dolores, who was watching them both with tears in her eyes. Dolores, would you be willing to help us build something? Not as a cleaning lady, but as a founder? Dolores laughed through her tears. Marcus, I don't know anything about running a company. No, but you know about running an ethical one. You know about treating people with dignity and leading with compassion. That's what we need most. Dolores looked at her daughter, then back at Marcus. Then I guess we better make sure this company lives up to its name. What name? Keisha asked. Marcus smiled. I was thinking Carter Technologies, after the family that saved my life. The room fell silent. Keisha and Dolores looked at each other, something passing between them that Marcus couldn't quite read. Then Keisha turned back to him, and for the first time since they'd met, she smiled without reservation. Carter Technologies, she said slowly, testing the words. I like it. Dolores wiped her eyes. Oh, baby, your grandmother would be so proud. They stayed up late into the night, planning, dreaming, imagining what they might build together. A company named for a cleaning lady, run by her daughter, founded on the ashes of a billionaire's arrogance. It shouldn't have worked. By every conventional measure, it was doomed to fail. But Marcus had learned something in the months since losing everything. Conventional measures were worthless. What mattered was the people you surrounded yourself with, the values you held onto, the willingness to be wrong and learn from it. He'd spent 40 years building an empire based on ego. Now he was going to build something based on truth. And this time, he wouldn't be building alone. The first office of Carter Technologies was a converted warehouse in a neighborhood most investors had never heard of. Marcus found it 3 weeks after the verdict, while walking through a part of the city he'd never visited during his billionaire years. The building was old, brick walls weathered by decades of neglect, windows clouded with dust. But the bones were good, and the price was right. It's perfect, Keisha said when she saw it. Marcus laughed. It needs a new roof, new wiring, and probably new plumbing. How is that perfect? Because it's ours. Because nobody gave it to us. Because we're going to build something here that matters. She was right. Marcus had spent 40 years in gleaming towers of glass and steel, surrounded by luxury that meant nothing. This warehouse, with its cracked floors and temperamental heating, felt more like home than his penthouse ever had. They worked around the clock to make it functional. Marcus learned to use power tools for the first time in his life, guided by contractors who didn't know or care that he'd once commanded a billion-dollar empire. Keisha set up server racks in what used to be a loading dock, transforming industrial space into a technology hub. Dolores organized everything else. Permits, schedules, the endless details that kept a business running. The first employees trickled in over the following months. Former Montgomery Innovations staff who'd been laid off after Victor's takeover. Young programmers from community colleges who couldn't get interviews at traditional tech companies. People who'd been overlooked, dismissed, told they weren't good enough. We can't pay much right now, Marcus told them during their first all-hands meeting, standing in the middle of the half-finished workspace. Actually, we can't pay anything except equity. But what I can offer is a chance to build something different. Something that values people over profit. Something that proves you don't need a fancy degree or the right connections to change the world. He looked around the room at the 23 faces watching him. I spent 40 years believing success meant corner offices and expensive suits. I was wrong. Success means building something that matters, with people who actually give a damn.
If you believe in that, if you're willing to work hard and take risks and fail sometimes, then welcome to Carter Technologies. To his surprise, most of them stayed. The algorithm they developed was different from anything Marcus had built before. Instead of the aggressive predictive modeling he'd pushed at Montgomery Innovations, designed to maximize profits at any cost, this version emphasized ethical investment patterns. It flagged companies engaged in worker exploitation or environmental destruction. It prioritized long-term sustainability over short-term gains. This isn't what investors want, one of their financial advisors warned during an early strategy meeting. They want maximum returns, not moral lectures. Then we'll find different investors, Keisha said firmly. People who understand that sustainable success means considering more than just quarterly profits. Marcus backed her completely. Keisha's right. We turn down any deal that contradicts our values, regardless of the price. Some investors grumbled. Others walked away entirely. But slowly, Carter Technologies built a reputation as a company that actually meant what it said. Their profits were modest compared to industry giants, but they were sustainable and clean. The first major investor who believed in them was a small nonprofit focused on ethical business practices. They provided $50,000 in seed funding, barely enough to keep the lights on, but it was a start. Then a tech blogger wrote about their project, praising the innovative approach to algorithmic ethics. The article went viral. Suddenly, they had attention they couldn't have bought. More investors called. Small ones at first, then mid-sized venture capital firms, intrigued by the ethical angle. Marcus turned down anyone whose values didn't align with their mission. "You're leaving money on the table," the financial advisor said, frustrated. "No," Marcus replied. "I'm building something that will still be standing when those money-hungry vultures have moved on to their next victim." 6 months after the verdict, Victor Gaines was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. Marcus watched the news coverage from the Carter Technologies break room, surrounded by employees who'd stopped working to witness the moment. Victor appeared on screen being led away in handcuffs, his face blank, his posture defeated. "How do you feel?" Keisha asked quietly, standing beside him. Marcus thought about it. "Empty. I expected to feel vindicated, satisfied. But all I feel is sad." "Sad? After everything he did to you?" "Sad because it was all so pointless. Victor was brilliant. He could have been my partner for real, not just on paper. We could have built amazing things together." Marcus shook his head. Instead, he spent 15 years nursing jealousy and resentment until it consumed everything. What a waste. That night, a letter arrived at Marcus's hotel. The return address was the federal correctional facility where Victor was awaiting transfer to his permanent prison. Marcus stared at the envelope for a long time before opening it. The letter was brief. "Marcus, I've had a lot of time to think about what I did and why. I told myself I was ambitious, driven, willing to do what it took to succeed. The truth is, I was terrified. Terrified that I wasn't good enough, that I'd be exposed as a fraud, that everything I'd built would crumble. So I destroyed you before you could realize you didn't need me. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that watching you rebuild with integrity has taught me more about leadership than I learned in 20 years of business school and corporate warfare. You were always better than I gave you credit for. I just couldn't see it through my own fear and jealousy. Victor." Marcus read the letter twice, then folded it carefully and put it in his desk drawer. He didn't respond. There was nothing to say. Victor would have to find his own path to redemption, just as Marcus had. Some lessons couldn't be taught. They had to be learned through consequence and reflection. The scholarship program launched on the one-year anniversary of the verdict. They called it the Carter Foundation, funded by the damages Marcus had redirected from the civil case. The first class included 50 students from underprivileged backgrounds, young people with talent and determination, but without the resources to pursue traditional paths to success. Keisha personally reviewed every application, looking for the qualities that couldn't be measured by test scores or transcripts. Creativity, resilience, the hunger to prove themselves against impossible odds. "This one," she said, sliding a folder across the table to Marcus. "Maria Santos grew up in foster care, taught herself to code on library computers, got rejected from every university she applied to because she couldn't afford the application fees." Marcus read the application essay. It was brilliant, not because of fancy vocabulary or polished prose, but because of the raw honesty that shone through every word. "Accepted," he said. "And this one, James Washington. His father is in prison, his mother works 3 jobs, and he's been supporting his family since he was 14. His teacher says he's the most talented programmer she's ever seen, but he was about to drop out of school to work full-time." Accepted. And these 12 others. Marcus looked at the stack of folders. 50 applications, 50 young people who reminded him of Keisha, brilliant minds trapped by circumstances beyond their control. "All of them," he said. "Accept all of them." The scholarship program covered full tuition, provided mentorship from Carter Technologies employees, and guaranteed internships upon completion. But more than that, it offered something Marcus wished he'd understood 40 years ago. Belonging. The first cohort gathered in the Carter Technologies warehouse for orientation. Marcus stood before them, looking at 50 faces filled with uncertainty and hope. "You're here because someone saw your potential," he began. "Not your test scores, not your family connections, not your bank account. Your potential. The thing inside you that refuses to quit, no matter how many times the world tells you you're not good enough." He paused. "I spent most of my life believing that success meant distancing yourself from where you came from. My father was a janitor. My mother cleaned houses. I was ashamed of that. I built walls between myself and anyone who reminded me of my roots." He looked at Keisha, who stood near the back of the room, watching. "It took losing everything to understand how wrong I was. The people who saved me, who believed in me when I had nothing left, they weren't billionaires or executives. They were a cleaning lady and her community college daughter. They taught me that real strength doesn't come from money or power. It comes from integrity, compassion, and the courage to do what's right, even when it's hard." He spread his arms to encompass the warehouse around them. "This company exists because of that lesson. And this scholarship exists so you never have to learn it the hard way, like I did. You are not defined by your circumstances. You are defined by what you do with the opportunities you're given." Maria Santos raised her hand. "Mr. Whitfield, how do we know this isn't just another corporate program that'll forget about us once the press coverage dies down?" Marcus smiled. "Because my partner won't let me forget. And trust me, you do not want to disappoint Keisha Carter." Keisha stepped forward. "He's right. I grew up in the same neighborhoods you did. I know what it's like to be invisible, to be dismissed, to be told you don't belong in rooms full of people who've never had to fight for anything. This program isn't charity, it's investment. We're investing in you because we believe you're going to change the world. And we're going to be here every step of the way to make sure you have the tools to do it." James Washington spoke up. "What if we fail?" "Then you'll learn and try again," Keisha said simply. "That's what my mother always told me. Success isn't about never falling. It's about getting back up. Every single person in this room has already proven they know how to get back up.
That's why you're here." The warehouse fell silent. Marcus watched understanding dawn on 50 faces, the realization that for the first time in their lives, someone was betting on them.
It was the most meaningful moment of his career. 2 years after the verdict, Carter Technologies had grown beyond anyone's expectations. They'd moved out of the warehouse into a renovated community center, not a glass tower, but a building that felt connected to the neighborhood around it. They employed over 200 people, many of them graduates from their own scholarship program. Their ethical algorithm was being licensed by companies around the world. But more importantly, they'd proven something that Marcus had once believed impossible. You could build a successful business without destroying people in the process. Keisha had become a sought-after speaker, invited to universities and tech conferences around the world. She never hid her background: the community college degree, the single mother who cleaned houses, the apartment in Queens where she'd taught herself to code from library books. Innovation doesn't come from everyone thinking the same way, she told audiences. It comes from bringing together people with different experiences, different struggles, different perspectives, and letting them challenge each other's assumptions. Dolores had become the heart of the company's community outreach. She established partnerships with local schools, created job training programs for adults trying to change careers, and ensured that Carter Technologies remained connected to the neighborhood that housed them. "We don't just take from this community," she told a local newspaper during an interview. "We invest in it. These are our neighbors. Their success is our success." Marcus found his role shifting over time. He handled business operations and investor relations, but he no longer dominated decision-making. Instead, he facilitated. He listened. He amplified Keisha and Dolores's voices, rather than overshadowing them with his own. It was harder than running his old company had been. Collaboration always was, but infinitely more rewarding. One evening, as the sun set over the city, Marcus found himself on the roof of the community center with Keisha and Dolores. They came here sometimes, the three of them, to escape the constant demands of running a successful company, to remember why they were doing it. "I've been thinking about something," Marcus said, breaking the comfortable silence. "Dangerous habit," Keisha replied. "I want to establish a charter, something that legally binds the company to its principles, even if ownership changes or market pressures increase. A constitution for what Carter Technology stands for." Dolores nodded slowly. "So that what we've built can outlast us." "Exactly. I want to make sure that whoever runs this company 50 years from now can't just throw away everything we've worked for because it's more profitable." They spent weeks drafting the document, working with lawyers to create legally binding commitments to ethical practices, community investment, diverse hiring, and profit sharing with employees. It wasn't perfect. No document could cover every possible scenario. But it was a foundation. The charter was adopted unanimously by the board. Carter Technologies was now legally committed to being the kind of company they'd envisioned from the start. 5 years after the trial, Marcus received an invitation he never expected. Stanford's business school wanted him to speak. The same institution where he'd once lectured about ruthless competition and market dominance. But this time, they wanted a different story. He stood before a new generation of MBA students and told them the truth. "When I last spoke here, I told you that success meant being the smartest person in the room, the hardest worker, the most ruthless negotiator. I told you that compassion was weakness, and that you should never let emotion interfere with profit." He paused. "I was wrong about everything." He told them about his fall, about Keisha and Dolores, about learning that real strength meant admitting weakness, and real intelligence meant recognizing the brilliance in others. "The company I run now makes a fraction of what my old company made, but it creates more value, actual, meaningful value, than anything I built before. We employ people who deserve opportunities. We develop technology that makes society better, not just richer. We measure success in lives changed, not just dollars earned. A student raised her hand. But isn't that idealistic? How do you compete with companies that don't have those constraints? By redefining what competition means, Marcus replied. We're not trying to destroy our competitors or dominate markets. We're trying to prove that ethical business is viable business. And slowly, the market is responding. More investors want to fund purpose-driven companies. More consumers support businesses that align with their values. He looked around the room. The game is changing. The question is whether you want to win by the old rules or help write new ones. After the lecture, dozens of students approached with questions. They wanted to know how to balance ambition with integrity, how to succeed without compromising their values. Marcus realized that this generation was asking different questions than his generation had. They'd seen enough corporate scandals, environmental destruction, and economic inequality to wonder if there might be a better way. There is a better way, he told them. I'm living proof. But it requires giving up some things. Ego, shortcuts, the belief that you're entitled to success just because you want it. In return, you get something far more valuable. The ability to look yourself in the mirror and actually like what you see. 10 years after losing everything, Marcus stood before a crowd of 500 people in the Carter Technologies headquarters. The building had grown, expanded to include an innovation lab, a community education center, and office space for over 400 employees. The scholarship program had supported over 1,000 students, with a 93% graduation rate and a 100% job placement rate. But today wasn't about statistics. Today was about saying goodbye. When I started this company, Marcus began, I was a broken man. I've lost my fortune, my reputation, my pride. I had nothing left except the kindness of two women who had every reason to let me fail. He looked at Dolores, who sat in the front row with tears streaming down her face. Dolores Carter taught me that dignity isn't something you earn with money or titles. It's something you carry inside yourself, no matter what circumstances you face. She spent 26 years cleaning up after people who never bothered to learn her name, and she never once lost her grace or her compassion. He turned to Keisha, who stood beside him on the stage. Her daughter taught me that brilliance doesn't come from fancy schools or expensive credentials. It comes from refusing to accept the limitations other people try to put on you. Keisha saw patterns where experts saw chaos. She found truth where professionals found dead ends. She saved my life by believing I was worth saving. Marcus stepped back from the podium. I'm 72 years old. I've been running companies since before most of you were born. But the last 10 years have taught me more about leadership than the previous 40 combined. And now it's time for me to step aside and let the next generation take the wheel. He gestured to Keisha. Keisha Carter has been my equal partner since the beginning. Today, she becomes CEO of Carter Technologies. Not because I'm giving her the position. She earned it. Every innovation, every ethical standard, every life we've changed traces back to her vision and her determination. Keisha stepped forward, her expression composed, but her eyes bright with emotion. I never wanted to run a company, she said. When Marcus first offered me this partnership, I almost said no. I didn't trust the corporate world. I'd seen what it did to people, how it chewed them up and spit them out, how it rewarded greed and punished integrity. She looked at Marcus. But he convinced me that we could build something different. And we did. Not because we were smarter than everyone else, but because we refused to compromise on what mattered. We turned down money when it came with strings attached. We hired people everyone else had given up on. We measured success by impact, not profit. She turned to the audience. That's what Carter Technologies is. That's what it will always be, as long as I'm in charge. And when my time comes to step aside, I'll make sure the next leader understands the same thing, that this company exists to serve people, not the other way around." The applause was thunderous. After the ceremony, Marcus found himself alone in his office for the last time. He sat in the chair where he'd made 1,000 decisions, looking at the photos on his wall. Keisha receiving her first industry award. Dolores cutting the ribbon on the community center. Scholarship recipients at their graduation ceremonies, holding diplomas they'd never thought possible. A knock at the door. Keisha entered, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "Thought you might want company," she said. Marcus accepted the cup. "You know, I never drink coffee anymore. Dolores says it's bad for my heart." "She says a lot of things." Keisha sat in the chair across from him. "Are you sure about this? Retiring, I mean? You could stay involved. Advisory role, board membership, something." "No." Marcus shook his head. "This is your company now. Has been for years, really. I was just too stubborn to admit it." "You're not stubborn. You're determined. There's a difference." "Is there?" Keisha smiled. "That's what you always told me." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, 2 people who'd traveled an impossible road together. "I have something for you," Marcus said finally. He reached into his desk and pulled out a worn piece of paper. "Do you remember this?" Keisha took the paper. Her eyes widened. It was a napkin from a coffee shop, the same coffee shop where they'd met David Chen all those years ago. On it, in Keisha's handwriting, was a list of everything they needed to prove Victor's guilt. "You kept this?" "I kept everything. Every note, every draft, every piece of paper from those first days when we were working out of your mother's apartment." Marcus's voice was thick. "I wanted to remember what it felt like to build something from nothing, to have people believe in you when you'd given them no reason to." Keisha stared at the napkin, her finger tracing her own handwriting. "You know what I remember most about those days?" she said softly. "I remember being terrified. I was 20 years old, going up against lawyers and executives and a system that was designed to crush people like me. Every morning I woke up thinking, today they're going to find out I'm a fraud. Today they're going to realize I don't belong here." Imposter syndrome. "Yeah," she looked up at him. "But you never made me feel that way. You never talked down to me or dismissed my ideas. You treated me like an equal from the beginning." "Because you were. From the moment you walked into my penthouse and asked if you could take a look, I knew I was dealing with someone special. I just didn't have the words to say it." "You have them now." Marcus stood, crossing to the window. The city spread out below him. Not the view from a 63-story tower, but the view from a community center in a neighborhood that had been forgotten by people like his old self. "When I was building Montgomery Innovations, I used to stand at my window and look down at the city. I thought I was looking at my kingdom. All those people going about their lives, not knowing that I controlled so much of what happened to them." He turned back to Keisha. "Now I look at this neighborhood and I see something different. I see the restaurant owner who hired 3 of our scholarship graduates. I see the school where we run coding workshops for kids. I see the community center where your mother teaches financial literacy to single parents." He smiled. "I don't see a kingdom. I see a community. And that's so much better." Keisha stood, joining him at the window. "You know what I see?" she said. "I see a man who lost everything and found something better. Who had every reason to become bitter and chose to become humble instead. Who could have spent his last years counting his grievances and decided to count his blessings." She put her hand on his shoulder. "I see someone who proved that it's never too late to change." Marcus felt tears prick his eyes. He didn't try to hide them. "Thank you," he said, "for seeing something worth saving when I couldn't see it myself." "Thank my mother.
She's the one who made me help you. I have. Every day for 10 years.
That evening, the three of them gathered one last time on the roof of the community center. Marcus, Keisha, and Dolores. The unlikely trio who'd built something from nothing. The billionaire, the cleaning lady, and her daughter. 3 people who should never have crossed paths, bound together by circumstance and choice. I remember the first time I cleaned your penthouse, Dolores said, breaking the comfortable silence. You didn't look at me once. Not for 3 years. I could have been a ghost. I know. I was a different person then. You were a fool, Dolores said, but her voice was warm. A rich fool with too much ego and not enough sense. Marcus laughed. I can't argue with that. But you changed. Not many people do, you know. Not really. They say they've changed. They make promises. But when things get hard, they go right back to who they were. She looked at him with something like wonder. You actually became someone different. I had good teachers. Keisha cleared her throat. So what are you going to do now, with all this free time? Marcus thought about it. I'm going to visit my son. We haven't spoken in almost 15 years. I don't know if he'll see me, but I'm going to try. He'll see you, Dolores said confidently. How do you know? Because you're not the same man who drove him away. And if he has any of your stubbornness, he spent 15 years regretting that door he slammed. She patted his arm. Give him a chance to open it again. Marcus nodded, storing away the advice. And after that, he continued, I'm going to write a book. Tell the whole story, from the beginning. Not just the fall and the trial, but everything that came after. Everything you two taught me. What are you going to call it? Keisha asked. Marcus smiled. I was thinking, can I take a look? That's where it all started. 5 words that changed everything. I like it. They watched the sun set together, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Below them, the building hummed with activity. Employees finishing projects, students attending evening classes, community members gathering for a neighborhood meeting. Life, in all its messy, beautiful complexity. You know what the best part is? Marcus said quietly. What? None of this exists because of my brilliance or my money or my connections. It exists because your mother had compassion for a fallen man, and you had the courage to help someone who didn't deserve it. He turned to face them both. Everything good in my life now traces back to kindness I did nothing to earn. That's not a legacy I built. That's a gift I was given. Dolores took his hand. Keisha took the other. That's how it's supposed to work, Dolores said. We lift each other up. That's what makes us human. My grandmother used to say that, Keisha added. She'd say, Baby, you're not here just for yourself. You're here for everyone who can't get here on their own. That's the deal. I didn't understand it when I was young. Now I do. Marcus squeezed their hands, these 2 remarkable women who'd saved him from himself. Thank you, he said, for everything. For seeing me when I was invisible. For believing in me when I'd given up. For teaching me that real power isn't about what you can take. It's about what you can give. Keisha smiled. Don't get sentimental on us, old man. You still have a book to write. And a son to visit, Dolores added. And a world to change, Marcus finished. They laughed together, the sound carrying across the rooftop and into the gathering darkness. Below them, lights were coming on across the neighborhood, in apartments and businesses, in the community center and the schools Carter Technologies supported. Each light represented a life, a family, a story of struggle and hope. Marcus had spent 40 years trying to climb above all of it, to rise so high that the struggles of ordinary people could never touch him. He'd succeeded, for a while. And then he'd fallen harder than he ever imagined possible. But in falling, he'd learned something precious. Something that all his billions had never taught him. The view from the top was nothing compared to the feeling of being part of something bigger than yourself. He looked at Keisha, who was already planning tomorrow's challenges. At Dolores, who was probably thinking about what to cook for dinner. At the city spread out below them, full of people living their lives, fighting their battles, reaching for their dreams. He was one of them now, not above them, not separate from them, but part of the great messy human family he'd spent his whole life trying to escape. And it was better, so much better than anything he'd known before. The story that began with a fall ended with a foundation, not of glass and steel, but of principle and partnership, built to last long after they were gone. Marcus Whitfield had lost everything once: his fortune, his company, his pride. He'd stood at the edge of complete destruction, certain that his life was over. Then a cleaning lady's daughter had asked 5 simple words. "Can I take a look?" And everything had changed. Not because she'd saved his company, not because she'd helped him win a lawsuit or rebuild his fortune, because she'd shown him what he'd been too blind to see all along. That the measure of a life isn't what you accumulate, but what you contribute. That success isn't about rising above others, but about lifting them up beside you. That the people you overlook might be the ones who save you, if you're humble enough to let them. Marcus smiled as the last light faded from the sky. He'd spent 40 years building an empire based on ego. In the end, it took losing everything to discover what actually mattered. And that made all the difference.